Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joining all of us today on the ANRA Huddle. I'm delighted to be here for the first time and feel privileged to be part of this discussion. My name is Munish Kurana. I work as a Senior Manager of Business Development here at Eurocontrol. We are based in Brussels and we are in the business of looking after European aviation, supporting European aviation to integrate drones safely. I'm joined today by a number of friends and colleagues, in no particular order. Stefan Valberg from EASA, Amit Ganju, the CEO of ANRA, Amanda Buchhold from Swiss CAA FOCA, and Stephen Sutton, who's a drone operator based out of Finland. And later we'll be joined by another friend and colleague of ours, Andrew Haitley from Eurocontrol. So let me first set the scene. Well, we are today really at the crossroads of the U-Space implementation project, if I can call that. The regulations came out, U-Space Regulation 664 came out in 2021 and came into effect in 2023. And since then, a number of member states in Europe have been trying to implement U-Space. Now, it's needless to say, I think there are some challenges to implement U-Space, but we've also had some initial successes, and we'd like to talk about those and also to share with all of you on what we learned from those successes and what challenges lie ahead of us. Today, as we speak, I'm delighted to report that we have, at least in Europe, in European Union, three certified CISPs and three certified USSPs, of which ANRA is one of those one of those organizations that's been certified by EASA, and the other two have been certified by their national CAA. So this is good news. It sets us in a direction to try and implement various aspects of U-Space airspace. And what we'd like to do today is to learn from, first of all, Amit about his journey or the journey of ANRA Technologies to see how they started, what they went through, what challenges they faced, and what looks ahead for them. But at the same time, we'll also learn from our colleague Stefan Valberg from EASA about what does this mean about delivering services? Can we really start from now onwards or not? We will talk to a member of our Swiss FOCA, the CAA, to learn how Switzerland is preparing itself for the next steps, and also talk to Stephen about the perspective of a drone operator itself. So, without further ado, and we're going to keep it nice and informal. And you, as attendees and all members of the audience, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions from us and the panelists. The Q&A window will be open or will be activated in half an hour's time. In fact, in exactly 27 minutes time from now. So you will have an opportunity to start registering your questions. And roughly in 45 minutes from now, I will address those questions to the panelists and try and get answers to your questions as such. So I think maybe it would be appropriate, Amit, that if I first turn my attention to you, because, well, first of all, congratulations to ANRA for being the first certified um, USSP by EASA. Um, and I'm sure you had to work very hard. I know that you and your members of staff have been very busy for some time. And also a big congratulations also to EASA colleagues, because I know that they have been working extremely hard on this as well. But perhaps what you could do, Amit, for us is give us a sense of what your journey looked like. You know, who was involved in this journey? How long did it take? How did you start? And what's your vision? What's the vision of ANRA? Where do you want to take it? And perhaps as you go through that journey, highlight some key moments where you face specific challenges and how you address those challenges. Um, and give us a sense of your timetable, if you can, please. So over to you, Amit.
Uh, Thanks, Manish. First of all, thank you for a loaded question, because it's a fairly elaborate question, and I'll try to address all the elements that you asked. But before I start there, I think one thing a lot of time we get these questions. Some people cannot make this webinar. This webinar will be recorded and will be available online on the Huddle archive channel as well as on the Drone Life channel for free for forever for people that miss this session. So to answer your question, the journey of getting certified, it was a long, arduous journey. It took us 2 years and 5 days, I believe. Uh, it was driven entirely in terms of who was involved, what the process was like. Our journey was driven entirely by our team internally. We didn't have any external consultants, no shortcuts, but it was a cross-functional team spanning our engineering, product, compliance, operation, as well as executive leadership. I can tell you one thing for sure: as a small company, at times it felt like our whole company only thing it was doing was certification and nothing else. It was a very draining effort, a fulfilling effort at the end of it, at the tail end of it, but it was very arduous. And we worked very closely in a collaborative fashion with IASA. And we're fortunate to have an amazing team: Stefan, Maria, Begonia, and others, very supportive. The process itself was very intensive, but it was an iterative process. Like, for example, we as an organization were doing a lot of things that were required, such as software assurance, cybersecurity control, service level monitoring. But we had to formalize those things. We had to align them with the regulatory expectations because they were not necessarily always one to one. And we had to provide not just documentation, but we had to provide detailed evidence for each of those requirements and have that traceability top down. We had to submit a ton of information, technical, procedural, and organizational documentation. Overall, we submitted 27 major documents, and these are not like 1 or 2 page documents. Some of them are multiple hundreds of pages long documents. These covered things like system architecture, safety assessment, software assurance, incident management, service continuity, etc. What else can I tell you? But in terms of certain things like obligations for us as a USSP, we had to prove our obligations, such as maintaining liability insurance, cyber hygiene measures, compliance management frameworks, which were fortunately for us as an organization were already baked in, but we just kind of had to formalize that. Luckily, we didn't have to make a lot of changes to the organization to cater, which was a pleasant surprise for us. Knowingly or unknowingly, we were already doing these. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel, but we had to codify many of our best practices, which meant we had to formalize for example, our quality management system, had to institute a traceable change control and reinforcing internal processes. In all, it took us, like I mentioned, a little over 2 years. And this is a metric that Stefan shared, so I can share it publicly. We went through 9 audits, which is not 9 single day audits. Some of them were week-long audits. So 9 multiple day audits. We submitted 27 detailed documents, and we had 15 major review/familiarization sessions over that 2-year period. So this wasn't just a paperwork exercise. This was a deep dive into every aspect of our platform and operations as an organization. So
just as much as I feel for you, Amit, and your members of staff, I also feel for the guys in IASA because they had to read 2,700-page documents and go through all the various audits and the process and doing that. That can't be easy. So I guess it's both sides as well. But
yes, absolutely.
It just goes to show how detailed and how thorough this assessment was, and it only highlights the maturity with which the work was done from both sides, I guess. And so congratulations for that. Give us a sense of what sort of milestones did you have? I don't know if you can. For instance, how you started and what did first phase look like, and what was there? Were there phases that you went through?
Uh, I wouldn't call it phases necessarily, but it was an iterative process because a lot of what we had to do was making sure the expectations were right on the same. We understood what IASA wanted and what we were delivering were alignment, because a lot of the times because this was the first certification. So just like we were figuring things out, EASA was figuring things out too. Like when we started, there weren't necessarily templates for everything. Like this is how you do it, and you submit information. So we are collaborative. So I'll tell you, it was amazing experience. We had been working with regulators previously, but it was amazing experience working with the EASA team because it was truly a collaboration. It was truly because they realized they were learning things. They didn't give us a pass on anything. I'll tell you that we didn't get a pass on anything. So it was they set an extremely high benchmark, extremely high threshold, and I'm glad it did it because it set up. They had to set a precedence, and I think we as an organization came out better at the tail end of it. But to answer your question, it was there are key aspects. If I was to kind of give you a thematic answer, it was like we had to do familiarization meetings where basically we familiarized EASA with, hey, here's how we do things. Here's what the process looks like. Here's how we do X, Y, Z. And then EASA went back and said, okay, now I understand what you do. I'm coming from the traditional ATM world. This is how we used to look at certifying this system. Now, in your case, this thing translates one to one. This thing doesn't translate this to one. We have to look at a new means of how we will audit and close that gap and certify that. And Stefan is probably a better person to answer that question. But it was first the familiarization and then submitting documentation that EASA reviewed and iterated. And we had all the pieces. Fortunately, like I mentioned, we didn't have to re-engineer the organization, but we have to codify it in a way that made sense to EASA, which was not always the case. We had information in different places. There was some terminology differences. Like, uh, yeah, we can probably joke about this, but I think we spent a month figuring out the difference in the terminology that EASA was using when they used verification and validation, and when we were saying QA. We meant the same thing, but the terminology was different. And I think it took us a month to finally realize, aha, we had that aha moment. Oh, we're talking about the same thing. We're just using different terms. So it was that kind of aspect as well. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, it does, and it's very interesting. In fact, I'm glad Andrew's here. Hello, Andrew. I'm glad you joined in. In fact, Andrew and I and Stephen and Stefan Wauberg, we were both, all three of us, in Hamburg, and Andrew ran a panel which was similar to this one with three, in fact, two CISPs and two USSPs, and the timeline that you've given, which is around 2 years, 5 days, isn't that surprising because others also said at least it was somewhere in the same sort of ballpark figure, at least for USSP. I think the CISP was slightly different, but for USSP it was somewhere of the same lines. That's good. Let's move to Stefan Wauberg now. Stefan, so a lot of hard work done by you and your team members as well to make this a success for both parties. Um, what does this USSP certification really mean now in the context of implementing USpace? Can ANRA now go ahead and start providing services? And what more needs to be done to really start the journey of provision of USpace services, please?
Yes, so to answer to your question, and after that I will develop the answer is yes, they can start to provide services at any time now because they have been certified for that. So what we have certified is the provision of service. So it's not per se a software, a system, an organization. What we have certified is a safe provision of USpace services. So as long as it's done and remain valid a long time, ANRA is fully empowered and legitimate, entitled to provide the services at any place in Europe. I would like to clarify a bit one or two things, and thank you, Amit, for the debrief. I'm afraid that it may worry some applicants that may listen, but actually, I think that what has been done with ANRA is certainly being done or has been done with other authorities. So it's why that notion of, in terms of time and effort, around 2 years, 1 year and a half for USSP, is certainly a good benchmark for the people who want to apply. Because as said by Amit, but what we do is a systematic, rigorous control of all type of activities performed by the company. So we start by the pure organization of the company we are auditing and we are certifying. plus by all the systems that are contributing to the service provision. So the software, the product itself, the compliance with the regulation in terms of provision of service, the cybersecurity, safety analysis, and many other things that are necessary, required to ensure the safe provision of the service. So that's systematic, that's rigorous, that must be documented, because it's not a matter of chit-chat. What we certify an organization, I will come back to that in a second, we want to be sure that the safe provision service will be maintained a long time. And actually, the certificate is only the first step in the long journey that will occur all along the provision of service, whatever the place in Europe. Everything needs to be documented, 27 documents, everything needs to be agreed. So when we say 27 documents, even does not properly provide the effort we did, because it was necessary to have multiple reviews on the same document before to get a review. So based on that certificate, yes, ANRA can provide services in multiple places of Europe. I want to remind the regulation that to generalize from the ANRA case something that are applicable to every USSP in Europe. There is a notion of principal place of business, which means that the USSP who want to apply for a certification needs to look at it, identify that notion of principal for business, but I make it short, is more or less the headquarters of the organization. So they must go to the national authorities or civil aviation authorities to their country. There is then little possibility for one European organization to change of country. In the case of ANRA and other non-European organizations, by law, they must go to EASA. There are other little options, but that's the key principle. That key principle is associated with another one, which is in the European regulation, European law, which is the mutual trust that the member state may give to the certificate. So as soon as a USSP or a single SFIS, but here in that case will be the USSP, is certified, the other member state must trust the content of the certificate, meaning that they must not re-engage a certification, they must not challenge the certificate. If there are some issues, we have other way or means to get information, but if one USSP is certified by one member state in Europe, they are, like ANRA, totally entitled to provide services anywhere else in Europe. There is a third principle that I need to develop there, because it's what about the trust we can have anyway on the certificate. And for that, EASA with the other member state, we have various means, either proactively, and Amanda and the other member state are part of the task force we have on certification, where we share practices. We share exactly in that kind of forum what we did for the certification. We have a discussion in small group about we did about software, we did about cybersecurity, we did about software. Make sure that we have more or less the same average level of effort. And EASA is controlling the member states. And I did, for instance, an investigation. We went to a member state, we controlled the member state, and we controlled the certification activities and the certificate that was done to non-EASA USSP. So through those tools, normally, yes, we can ensure a kind of a level playing field in Europe, and all USSP have then that possibility to move from one country to the other. As I said, it's only the beginning of the story, because as soon as they are certified, they enter a new process, which is the oversight. So the member states and their competent authorities must maintain control of their providers all along the provision of service. So if ANRA wants to stop, for sure, it will end the discussion. But if ANRA provides service in Europe during the next 25 years, they will have a regular monitoring where we will ensure that they will continue to maintain compliance with all the activities and agreement we form. So that's the way to ensure that there is no deviation and no safety issue in the process. Should they deviate, we have to suspend or to revoke the certificate. So I'm sure it will not come.
That's clear.
But I want to make sure that in ATM it happens. In ATM it happens that some certificates were suspended, etc. So we have other tools in order to maintain the compliance all a long time. There were one last step, but I think it's for Amanda maybe to explain. When you have the certificate, unfortunately, it's not sufficient to directly, immediately provide the services. That's because for EASA, for instance, we don't manage any USPSI space. So we have granted the certificate based on assumptions. No for ANRA, but the next challenge will be to reconcile the scope of their certificate with a real environment and to do all the adjustments necessary to be integrated and to provide their services. I stop there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's quite thorough, and thank you very much. You shared a lot, and I'm sure members of the audience listening to you and those who are preparing to on this journey or going through it at the moment will benefit from what you've just shared with them. Which really brings me, as Stefan said, to Amanda now. Amanda, now I know that in Switzerland, what is your expectation? Let's take it forward from where Stefan left. So ANRA is now certified as a USSP. Can they start delivering services in Switzerland?
So, short answer, by the regulation, yes. As Stefan just mentioned, there is a mutual recognition of so the certificates across all member states. As stated in the USPACE regulation, as soon as you're certified as a USSP, you need to notify the competent authority of the member states where you intend to start the operations. However, in practice, this involves a huge, I would not say huge, but it's a whole process. So in Switzerland,
Yeah.
we call it the onboarding process. And this is actually where we are now in the whole development of the USpace Airspace in Zurich, what we call the soft launch. So this onboard, oh, go ahead. You had a question.
No,
No?
onboarding processes. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
So the onboarding process is, for now, is not really a procedure that is standardized nor even harmonized across member states. So theoretically, each member states could have different procedures depending on the use space architecture, the use space airspace, and so on and so forth. So FOCA, so us, we really would like to avoid that to have a fragmented onboarding process. We really want to propose a standardized onboarding approach. And this is precisely what we're working right now with this whole implementation of USpace in Zurich. So this onboarding process, in short, is that before a USSP can actually start providing USpace services, it must first understand which USpace airspace it intends to operate in. So it needs to ensure that the USSP is aligned with the limitations and the scope of its certificate first. What is also really important to leverage that all USpace airspace can differ in the same country. So it may be in control or uncontrolled airspace. It can have also different performance levels. Then, as soon as they understand in which airspace they want to operate, they also need to have appropriate data sharing agreements, for example, with their ANSPs, with their single CISP, or even multiple CIS providers. Or, for example, if it's an uncontrolled airspace, they need to be sure that maybe they have to install equipments on the ground to receive icospicuity equipment or icospicuity data, for example. Then they have to establish a connection with the other USSPs that are already operating there. So they have to understand which standards are being used, identify, for example, gaps, requirements, and how to exchange data. And this usually involves like the signature of specific agreement. On top of that, and this is probably what is the most important, is that you need to, as a USSP, you need to demonstrate compliance with the standards that you will apply and show that your system is first interoperable with the other USSPs and that you can also exchange your data with the ANSPs or CISP and that everything is fully operational and at the end of the day that the system is robust enough. So there is several ways to before going into this operationalization process. So, for example, in Switzerland, all USSPs wishing to operate in the Swiss space airspace must undergo what we call this automated testing process to validate their system both against the standards first and then against the other USSP systems. This is carried in several stages. So there is staging environment, then the testing environment, and then the production environment. And at the end, once you have all the agreement in place that you prove to us that you completed all those stages and that you can really enter this production environment, you can start offering the use-based services. obviously, it's also really important to remember that you need to have US operators because this is also up to you to have to find your own market and to sign all the SLAs with the drone operators. So what is really important to highlight is that this onboarding process is applicable for each U-space airspace you intend to operate in, even within the same country, because as mentioned, the required performance levels may vary. So now imagine if each member states use a different process, this can be start to become really, really complicated for the USSPs. But as soon as you went through one onboarding process, then it becomes much easier to repeat. And maybe if I can give one tip, don't reinvent the wheel. It's same for the CIA and same for the industry or the USSPs. There is already a lot of tools, standards, and versus documents developed by SDOs, industry association, and consortium. So just look around you, even outside the EU, you'll find many lessons learned, data sharing, governance agreement templates, automated testing suites developed and also to verify compliance with the standard. So just look around and just share best practices with the others. This is my tip.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that's a very useful tip, and thank you for taking the journey forward because it's important to realize what this certification of the USSP means in the context of the whole end-to-end delivery of the use-based services. And that brings us to the next very important, perhaps I'd say the most important part of the jigsaw puzzle, and that is the operator. Because if you don't have one of those, then you can have as many certifications as you like, but there's no one out there to deliver those services. So, and that's when Stephen Sutton comes into it. So, Stephen, give us a sense of how you've been. We don't have use space. I, I I believe. Correct me if you're wrong. If I'm wrong, that you are not delivering any services in the use-based airspace yet. So you are delivering services today without the use-based services. But what does this certification of a USSP mean, and how will in the near future, I hope in the near future, not this distant future, you will start to operate in an environment of use-based airspace. How will that change the life of an operator? Will it make it easier or will it be difficult? Over to you.
Thank you, and great to be part of this nice huddle. Thank you. Yeah, we actually welcome a use space environment for our operations and what we do on let's say a daily basis, because we are finding that the airspace, or sorry the lower airspace, the unmanned side, it is starting to get rather busy. It's just starting to get a little bit congested there. And that means that we have to take matters into our own hands in order to manage that airspace, because we don't really have the airspace management at the moment. And I'm particularly the one who's going to organizations and actually saying, this is what we need to do. And I say, I set a process in place. So having the certification I think is a really, it's a great step forward. Now we really need to see it actually in practice, and we really need to see this. It can't come quick enough for us, and we are seeing this in many areas where we work, and mainly I think that when we tend to think of use space, you always tend to think of urban environments. That's always how we've seen use space over the years, since we have been having these events and seeing how use space has been tested. It's always been in these urban environments. But what actually we're seeing from our perspective now, we know that urban environments are going to be where this has to be the challenge, but where we see this is in areas that are actually very remote but are actually heavily congested with unmanned aviation. And this is where we need to have the management. And I'm currently using a remote ID a receiver in order to try to see what's happening in the airspace. But this is not something I should be using. I shouldn't have to be using a remote ID a receiver to spot if there's a drone in the air, because I need to rely on that drone operator having remote ID. And there's nothing to say that a drone operator must have remote ID. Of course, they must have it, but they can easily not have it, and then for them it is going to be an issue. So I still don't trust if I don't see anything. There's still something in the back because I know that it is a busy airspace. So that's where I am, or that's where we are, and I'm seeing that other drone operators don't see this. So they're just happily to go and fly, and they don't think about that this is, or this actually could be, or it is a congested airspace. So therefore, what should I do? I have WhatsApp groups for every area that we fly with different companies so that we all know where we are. That's how I'm managing the airspace. That's not, and this is not a good thing. So we really need to have USpace in place, not just in urban environments, but in areas that we know that desperately need it in order for safety.
This is very interesting, Stephen. Honestly, and we speak to a number of operators, and that's what we were doing over the last 2 days in Hamburg as well, of course. And this message that you're delivering, it was very similar to the message we got from some of the other operators over the last 2 days, but not just the last 2 days, over the last few months, that when we go and talk to these operators, because of the reasons that you've given. We may start. I think it was quite nicely put by one operator, which is, yes, we can deliver BVLOS operations today. You're doing it anyway in across Europe. But the trouble is, how do you scale up those operations? And how do you achieve efficiency, better safety and security, and peace of mind? And that's what USpace brings to the table. Not just for the drone operator, no doubt, drone operator, because you're reeling on you're in the firing line, if I can use that term.
Yeah.
It also brings a lot of efficiency, safety, security, and a peace of mind for other stakeholders, whether it's the ANSP, which could possibly be the CISP, if you like, of providing services, other authorities who are stakeholders, and so on. So it is it is a solution, a total solution, not just for one or two parts or actors of the equation, but all the actors of the equation itself.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me to Andrew now, because today we have the 4 mandatory practices and the 2 additional complementary optional practices as such. And okay, the drone traffic is what it is. Hopefully, it's improving, it's increasing, no doubt. But at some point in time, it's going to really take off. That's our expectations, and we think it's going to happen anyway. So we have initial, what we call in CESAR terms, U1, U2 services, and they are translated into the ones that are in the regulation itself. But Andrew, give us a sense of what lies ahead, because we don't have tactical deconfliction just yet. And what more needs to be researched, what more is being researched, and what can we expect in the future?
Okay. Apologies if I have problems with the connection. I'm still in my Hamburg hotel room and I'm connected through my phone. So if things drop, then I'm sorry. So yeah, first of all, to put it into context, Munish just used the word CESAR. So in Europe, there is a European Union initiative called the Single European Sky, and it has a research arm, which is called CESAR. And CESAR has a joint undertaking, which is between industry, the organization that Munish and I work for, Eurocontrol, and the European Union, which is funding research work. And this research work is at different levels of maturity. Typically, we start with a few ideas and people around a table, and we can think this might work. And then as we develop an idea, we'll start to test it in simulation, and we'll get to the point with saying, this is something which is economically viable, it produces benefits that we can measure, and then eventually we go to see how things are deployable. And starting at the highest level of maturity, there are 3 projects which are at what we call TRL 8, which is Technological Readiness Level 8, which is just before implementation. And these projects, UWelcome, Birdie, and EALUAIR, are looking at trying to make our initial implementation of USpace operate. UWelcome has been in Spain and Italy with a little activity in France. And if you look on their website, you'll see a whole lot of activity recently because these projects will end in October this year. And so they're all coming to a close with a lot of flight demonstrations and activities that you can see. Birdie is focusing on Antwerp Harbor. There is some other activity in other parts of Benelux. And Birdie has been hoping to include in its project scope the declaration of a use-based airspace over Antwerp Harbor. This is proving quite difficult. They haven't got it yet. We don't know if they will achieve it before October, but they're optimistic and they're pushing for it. Other things that Birdie have included has been the certification of SKIES, the Belgian air navigation service provider, as a single common information service provider. EALUair in Ireland, they're doing some very interesting work looking at how to detect aircraft. They've got particular involvement from Collins, so they're looking at radars and radio links and things like that. So another aspect of the deployment activity, but equally interesting. They had a big demo day a couple of weeks ago, which I was unfortunately not able to attend. But then these projects should all conclude, we think, on the 23rd and 24th of October with a big event. If you're interested, you may be able to come along. At the level of maturity below that, we have projects which are aiming for deployment probably within 5 to 10 years. And in there are people working on tactical conflict resolution. This is something that should increase the capacity of the use-based airspace. We today separate the aircraft based on the idea that the plans are separated and then the aircraft fly without further control. So we separate them very widely at the level of plans. If we are able to make corrections while the aircraft are airborne, we can be less cautious, should we say, or less conservative during the separation of the plans. So that kind of work we're hoping to deploy probably in the next iteration of the use-based regulation, which I'm sure Stefan is already penciling the draft of as we speak. And then beyond that, we're looking at future research projects more to how would we integrate UAS into the airspace without the need for a segregation into a use-based airspace. And there's a lot to do, but we have big hope to do something with a kind of, in the short term, a modified form of IFR. We thought we might be able to do something with these passenger carrying aircraft that you probably seen a lot of news of recently with the unfortunate events surrounding volocopters, financial problems, but they have survived in some form or another. And Lilium, unfortunately, we've lost them. But how will these aircraft fly? In the initial flights, they will be flying VFR, like some kind of electric helicopter. And we're looking at researching how could we make them fly in all weathers, in all conditions. So we're looking at things like integration into of all aircraft together. Integration of small UAS is perhaps a bit harder. And in the short term, our immediate need is going to be electronic conspicuity. We're looking at that both in CESAR research projects and outside in more ad hoc work. So there's a lot of stuff going on. CESAR has been well financed in the past. It's perhaps less of a European priority now, but there's still a lot of activity, and the research is yielding results which we're trying to apply. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Manish.
It does, and thank you very much for giving us a nice overview of not just what to expect, but also what's actually ongoing right now, and we can actually expect imminently within the next few months, and also at the same time what's around the corner in the next few years to come as such. Now, I was going to remind people of please deliver your questions, and just as a thought, 3 questions came, so that's very good. But I think I'll give it another 5 minutes for more questions to come in, and then really start addressing those to the panelists. But in the meantime, I do have one more question, which is effectively addressed to all of you, and you can take turns, no doubt, is knowing where we are, knowing what has been achieved so far, in terms of USSP certification, and as Stefan highlighted earlier on, there are 3 in Europe, 3 altogether. where do we go from here? And what opportunities lie in front of us to impact the drone operations, and both the opportunities and the challenges? What more challenges can we expect? And do you feel that we have now that we have at least a USSP certified that can deliver services across Europe? We even have 3 certified CISPs, and they are D-Flight in Italy, on a Navigazia in Lithuania, and Skies in Belgium. Soon there will be U-Space airspaces, I sincerely hope. What is your expectation on how the world of drone operations will change then, from the time that we have all the pieces of this jigsaw puzzle? Maybe I'll start with Amit first and then move to Stefan.
Thanks, Manish. So I think that's a great question. And I think it's a multi-part answer, because certification is just the beginning, right? It just gives us the license to drive. Now we have to start driving, and we have to deliver these services reliably in real world environment with multiple actors and stakeholders. One thing I think that needs to happen is interoperability between, as Amanda highlighted earlier, between multiple USSPs. That's one of the key things, because certification ensures that you are capable of that. But in real world, we need multiple USSPs rolling out in the same geography, and even across borders, because we'll have cross-border operations. And for us, we would like to leverage our certified core use-based services in Europe, across Europe. And then the other aspect is harmonization as well, because you rightfully pointed out that there have been CISP certified, USSP certified, but I think there's still a gap between standardization of what a CISP in a member state X versus what a CISP in a member state Y is doing in terms of scope and role and responsibilities, and the level of integration required with USSPs and those standardized interfaces. I think that's a challenge that we have to overcome and harmonize across. Then we also need to look at what does it need in terms of scalability, right? For us, like at the end of the day, as Stephen pointed out, operators are seeing a need for services like this. And for us as businesses, we, as a commercial, we want to build a model that can sustain and actually generate revenue, because we have invested thousands of hours and a significant amount of money into certification. It was not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. But now we have to figure out, how do we roll out? Because if we don't roll out, it's just a certificate and a press release. So how do we onboard these operators? And I think Amanda articulated so well. We need to have the operators have the service level agreements with them and start rolling it out in places, whether it's rural or urban areas where there's a business need and a driver. And actually, it takes a village, because at the end of the day, I think it's a big pond. There's plenty of fish, but we need more players. So yeah, we have a few CISPs, a couple of USSPs, but we need more, because as more start bubbling up across and offering services, that creates the market. I think that's what we need. So in a sense, it's a call for collaboration, because we can't work in silos. It's the ecosystem, from regulators to NSPs to drone providers to technology providers, and we all need to stay aligned and adaptive.
You're so right, and I'll add more to it. In fact, this morning we had a 3-hour conversation in the European Parliament, which was coordinated by the 3 leading European political parties. And one of the things that we discussed, many things, and one of the things we discussed was what's impeding the progress or the speed with which we can move forward as well. And amongst other things, the one aspect that we debated on, of course, was the need for more resources within both the EASA side of things, but also the national CAAs as well, and also the right level of skills there, because it is that pool of resource that's today working on 2 very big key activities, one of which, of course, is where Stephen Sutton needs their service today to approve the BVLOS operations, and that is operation by operation by operation. That needs to be done. But at the same time, it is the same pool of resource that's also working on preparing for the U-space airspace things, and whether it means airspace risk assessment or it means coordinating with other stakeholders and so on and so forth. So there are indeed, no doubt, many steps going forward to be able to fit into this jigsaw puzzle itself. I think rather than asking Stefan on more on this one, there is a deluge of questions from people. So I think I'd rather go into asking these questions, and I'm going to categorize those. The first set of questions, or one category, is all about finances, if you like. And that can be subdivided into two. So there's effectively two types of questions. I think the first one is addressed really to you, Amit, and that is to give a sense to our viewers and attendees on the cost that you have had to incur. I think you sort of highlighted the number of people that were involved, but maybe you can elaborate the cost that you've had to incur in this certification process. That's the first part of that question. So if you do that, then I'll go to the second one.
It was not cheap because so there are different aspects of costs. There is cost that we incurred in paying EASA. That's just one aspect of the cost. The other cost is because outside of paying EASA, our organization had to spend thousands and thousands of man hours to go through this certificate, getting all the information ready, adapting it, packaging it in the way, and having the iterations, review, updates, and stuff. So if I had to give you hours, I can't give you figures. I'll tell you it's in the somewhere between 5 and 10,000 man hours our organization spent over the last 2 years supporting this effort outside of what EASA spent. And then financially, I'm not sure if I'm at the liberty to disclose that, but it's hundreds of thousands of euros. So I'll just leave it at that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. There is another question which is perhaps slightly more sensitive, and if it's difficult to answer, you guys can just use your diplomatic sense to answer it, if I say that. And that is, what is your expectation on, or the anticipated cost of delivery of use-based service provision as you move into hopefully delivering these services? Because at the end of the day, Stephen Sutton, as an operator, will deliver it to the end user. Yeah, he will need to procure the USSP services from ANRA or other certified USSPs. Maybe rather than giving a figure, if you don't want to, could you give us a sense of what kind of model or models that might exist? Is it a licensing thing? Is it case by case, or is it a long-term time contract? What do you have in mind?
It would be a combination, and I can pick on Stephen because we are partnered with them. We already work with him, so he gets a family and friends discount.
All right.
So I think it's a combination. So what we have realized, it varies by the vertical, the customer, and the geography. Yeah. So there is, unfortunately, for people that are trying to ask for a business model, how do I price it and stuff? Is it per flight? Is it flat fee and stuff? I would say yes to all of them. You have to understand what the appetite of the market is, what the appetite of the customers are, and based on that structure, while making sure you can run a financially viable business. So it's a combination. There's no one I can tell you, because we've been doing this for 10 years, and in different markets and different kind of customers, it varies. I think we'll get to a point when the scale happens where unified pricing models may emerge in a competitive landscape, but I don't believe we are quite there yet.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
If I can just add something here, if you don't mind, over the years, I think that drone operators have always been concerned about the subject of pricing. You can push it into the negative narrative of pay to fly. And I always seem to have this attitude of why do drone operators think that they're somehow special, that they shouldn't be, let's say, treated like, manned aviation in a sense, but because I think the reality is that this will happen in some places, obviously, when it comes to use space and whatnot. But what actually drone operators don't realize at the moment is that they actually need this. This is something that they need. And it's not something that they want, they actually need it. Now, this is something that you do pass on to obviously the client. And if you are talking with your client and you're talking about safety, for us, it's about safety. I'm always thinking safety. I don't want a drone falling, because it hits another drone or whatever, or I don't want to be concerned about thinking about hitting another drone. I would just, I would rather that, we just do the work. But we need to be thinking about the need here. And drone operators will spend more time not flying, wondering when they can fly, rather than they can go there and you can fly. And it's, it is scheduled, that it's safe. Therefore, you can be, a lot more efficient and thus make more money in a sense. Because if you don't, you can be sitting around for half a day waiting for someone that is flying and you can't fly, which means that you're not able to do the work later on that you are supposed to do. So there's a cause and effect here when it comes to, having proper airspace management actually in place. So I do think that the reality of pay to fly, I don't mind. I think it's okay because at least I know where I stand and I know when I can fly. I know what I can do and when I can do it, and I can be more efficient, which then helps my clients, and obviously they are a lot happier.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Andrew.
Yeah, and I think Stephen is touching on a point here that there may have been a period when there were so few drone flights that you could ask for services from the Civil Aviation Authority and they would, oh, yes, okay. But as the number of flights grows, the pathways are either they will charge, so USpace is probably going to be cheaper than directly contracting with trying to get a danger area set up and stuff like that, or they will refuse because it's too much bother. And so I think we won't get away from the fact that there will be a payment required. And in a research project I'm involved in recently, we were asking about, in fact, it was to do with prioritization. Was there an interest in something like an auction? And what was interesting in the responses is that drone operators could understand the value of paying. And it was others who were responding, oh, they don't like involvement of money on principle. But no, I mean, Stephen, you have lots of other costs you have to cover. I'm sure adding in the cost of a service provision will be something that you can easily take account of. And there'll be a simple decision about, is it too expensive or not? But it's something that you can deal with. It's not a principle question, it's a practical question.
It is. And it's also about safety. And as I say, being more efficient as well.
Thank you.
And if I can,
yeah, go ahead, Amit.
And they're real world example. I can talk from our point of view. Like we have enterprise customers such as Mana Drone Delivery, DoorDash, even Amazon in certain markets is using our services, right? So, so that model in certain geographies, we see that model bubbling up elsewhere as well in other parts of, in many other member states and other parts of the world as well. And they are figuring out how it lines up with their business model and how they can, to Stefan's point, safety is paramount. How do you ensure safety of the operations, and what's the cost of safety at that point?
Thank you. And I think you touch on a question which is asked by Patrick van Egmond from Lux Mobility, which is, yes, of course, we go from certification to USSP and we have the services that are available, but when do we move from safety to the actual business case for drone operations for delivering transformation services? So I think you've kind of touched on that one. I hope, Patrick, that they've already given you sufficient information to think about it further. But there is a question from, I think it was Jean-Pierre Mout from Sky Drone, and he touches on something that Amanda highlighted. I think it was the need to harmonize the national onboarding process, which we all need, no doubt. But he's asking specifically a question to Stefan from IASA, and actually also to Eurocontrol, us, is how are we collectively going to work to try and actively contribute to the harmonization effort to try and avoid every 27 member states of the EU has a different approach. Yeah, Stefan, could you share your thoughts on how you think this harmonization can be achieved, please?
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, because that's a good question. That's very difficult. We have many tools that we have at our disposal to ensure harmonization. So we have the activities of EASA to control the member state. We have a different forum. We are working with Eurocay, for instance, for the technical standardization. You mentioned, or Andrew mentioned the fact that we may revise the MCGM, which will also bring a certain level of understanding, interoperability of system, etc. So we have many things that we have at disposal. Today, the big issue we have is limited capacity of various stakeholders, starting from EASA, because I am mostly the only one working on new space, and then to proactively engage with the member state, to proactively engage with the industry, to be able to support various rulemaking activities. That's pretty tough. So today, it's not that we don't know what to do and how to do, it's that we don't have the capacity to perform all the activities we have. I would like anyway to mention one or two streams that are active. We have a task force of member states that we have reactivated this year, in which we discuss all those problems of harmonization. It means the scope of the certificate, how to make a certificate, how to then we are starting to discuss with the support of OCA what means in terms of onboarding activity. We'll sign memorandum of cooperation with the various member states. So we know what are the issues. Currently, there is also Eurocay working on some development of technical standards, but we have difficulty to support everything. I think the question, the support of Eurocontrol, somehow Eurocontrol may help also in the sense that we are also looking for support for the designation of the USSP space. Here we are discussing about USSP, but USSP without airspace, it's for nothing. Huh? So currently the biggest issue we have, no, it's not the certification that we know how to do now. It's really the designation of the airspace. And here Eurocontrol may support us in a wide manner because many member states in Europe are relying on the Eurocontrol activities for designation of their first USPSA space. This is where Eurocontrol definitely may play a role, and I hope that we'll find a way to simplify all those activities to foster that first stage of implementation.
Thank you, Stefan. I think that's very well said. I think I've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, really. So let's get some questions quickly. Julie from AvTrain has just asked a question, which we kind of touched on, but let's go for it once again. Do EASA and the national authorities have appropriate skills and resources necessary to see widespread certification and implementation of USpace, and what timeline? I think we concluded earlier that actually they don't have sufficient resources right now, and if I was to ask this question, maybe only to Stefan, and I'd only ask part of that question, do you think that there is a timeline that you have within which EASA could obtain sufficient resources to satisfy the need that you have, the capacity need that you have? There's no point asking Stefan about national authorities, but let's just talk about EASA's needs.
Unfortunately not, because we are a bit tight by the subsidies that we have from the European Commission. So today we are a bit contained by that. However, we are looking for support of the member states in order to help us in the activities, and it's a matter of resource necessarily, but a matter of capacity and knowledge. And today, actually, the problem we see for the member states is to gather the resources for sure, but also the knowledge they need to have in software and cybersecurity. So it's dual. There is a dual problematic there, which by the regulation they must ensure. There is an article in the 664 requiring the member state to be equipped with the personnel and staff they need to support the certification, for instance. However, it's not that dark because what we see for the member state that did some certification, they are the cybersecurity expertise, they are the software expertise. So, and those that are looking to certify next year, in 2 years, their single CISP or USSP are starting to hire to look to develop their team and their capacity. Yeah. So we have the legal framework in order to enforce those teams. but okay, they are facing the same problem than EASA face. So limited budgets, limited resources. Munish,
Agreed.
if you let me just say a word.
Yeah, go on then. We've got 1 minute left. Go on.
Yeah, I would like to echo what has been said by Amit. From personal perspective, rather than the EASA, I started my career in certification more than 50 years ago, actually. That was the first time I saw a team that keen to learn, that keen to exchange, that keen to make the thing right, with a good level of quality and the highest level of rigor. So it has been really a pleasure to work with them. And personally, as said by Amit, it has been also collaborative, and I learned a lot on their system. And I hope that this experience will also be shared in EASA and generalized. So, and we have shared with the member state, by the way. So thank you, ANRA, thank you, Amit, and thank you, the full ANRA team.
That's very well said, Stefan. And I think it only shows the good collaboration between two parties here. And what a great example both of you have set for many more certifications to come in future. I will just answer one question without asking Amanda. I would have asked her otherwise, because there's a question from an anonymous attendee. He says, it looks like the first use space in EU is going to be from Zurich CTR. That's his assumption. We don't know that yet. Are there any other areas popping up before Zurich? I think in terms of which one pops up and which one pops up later, earlier or later, is difficult to state. But I think from what we've known so far, there are some cities or some areas where a lot of work is being done. No doubt Zurich is one of them. Antwerp is another one of them. And I know that there's Benidorm. There's stuff going on in Italian cities as part of You Welcome. So I think there are a number of them. Which one comes first, second, third? We don't know. And frankly, it doesn't really matter. I think we just want to see as many of those come forward as possible. We've gone 1 minute over 4 o'clock, which I think is probably enough for us to really thank all the speakers for sharing your thoughts in a very open and a flexible and transparent manner. Thank you all very much. I hope all of you listening to us enjoyed the huddle. We've tried to keep it as informal as possible. I think so. The questions that were not answered today, I think perhaps as a group of moderator and speakers, with the help of ANRA, we can probably reach out to some of these to try and answer them by email. Please do log into the ANRA huddles in future. I found it very useful. I think it's very useful for all others who can benefit from someone, or a relationship between a regulator and USSP that has gone so well, and it'll set a good tone for more and more of these good stories to follow. I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon and evening wherever you are. Take care of yourselves and look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye for now.